know that specific moment, that moment of panic?
I think I do.
You're watching a child, maybe it's your own, maybe a nephew, and they're playing with a toy or, I don't know, trying to tie a shoe and something goes wrong.
And they get frustrated.
They get frustrated and they make this very specific face.
Oh, I know exactly the face you're talking about. The scowl.
Right, the scowl. And you freeze because you realize you aren't looking at a child anymore. You're looking in a mirror.
Yeah.
You see your own stubbornness, your own anxiety, or maybe that weird way you hold your tongue when you're concentrating and it's just staring right back at you.
It's visceral, isn't it? It just stops you cold.
It really does. And it immediately triggers that heavy question we all obsess over, usually at like 3 a.m.
Nature or nurture?
Is this nature or nurture? Did they learn that reaction because they live in my house and watch me panic over burnt toast? Or is that reaction, hardwired into their biology?
Written in some code they can't escape.
Yeah, exactly. The ancient debate, destiny versus upbringing. Are we the architects of our children, or are we just the delivery system for their genes?
That's the question.
So, to get some actual answers, not just parenting blog speculation, we are doing a deep dive into a conversation with Konstantin Severnov.
Yeah.
He's a doctor of biological sciences, a real heavyweight geneticist, and he has this knack for taking the mind-bending complexity of molecular biology and turning it into something you can actually wrap your head around.
And what I love about Severnov's take is that he doesn't romanticize any of this stuff.
Yeah.
He just strips away the mystique of family legacy and replaces it with cold, hard, and surprisingly liberating math. Yeah.
So our mission today is to figure out just how much of our lives, our intelligence, our health, our personality is actually predetermined and how much is just, random luck or where we went to school.
And I should warn you now, the data on intelligence, specifically IQ, it's going to upset some people.
Oh, yeah.
It is definitely not what we want to hear.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's start there then, because this was the first thing in the research that made me just stop and reread the page.
Right.
We live in this world where we spend a fortune on education, tutors, baby Mozart, the right toys, all under the assumption that we are building a smarter child.
Of course.
But Severnov drops a stat on IQ heritability that feels like a slap in the face.
It is a reality check. He cites a heritability coefficient for IQ of roughly 0.8.
0.8, and that's on a scale of 0 to 1?
That's on a scale of 0 to 1. So it's massive.
Wow.
It is. To put that in perspective, that is remarkably similar to the heritability of height.
Oh, okay.
Tall parents usually have tall kids. And the data suggests that parents with high IQs tend to have kids with high IQs, largely regardless of the specific books they buy them.
That sounds incredibly deterministic, though. It sounds like game over before you even start.
I know.
If I'm not a genius, my kid won't be, and no amount of tutoring is going to fix that. That feels hopeless.
Well, hold on. This is where the data gets weird and really, really interesting. It's not a straight line. There is a massive twist here, and it's all about age.
Okay, walk me through this. I need a lifeline here.
So when researchers look at children, let's say up to age 10 or 15, the environment actually plays a massive role.
Ah, okay.
The correlation between the quality of their upbringing, the expensive school, the tutors, the pumping them full of knowledge, that and their test scores is very, very high.
So in elementary and middle school, nurture is actually doing the heavy lifting.
Huge lifting. You could essentially train a child to perform better. You can prop up their performance with a great environment. But
There's the but.
there is a cliff edge. As those children cross the age of 20, that environmental influence, it just starts to evaporate.
Just evaporate. That's a strong word.
It is. But he uses this brilliant image. He talks about scaffolding or crutches. think of all that intense education and upbringing as this support structure you build around a growing building. It holds everything up. It makes the structure look taller, more stable than it might naturally be.
But eventually the scaffolding comes down.
Exactly. And you're left with the building itself. You're left with the genetic baseline.
Wow.
The data shows that as adults, the influence of that expensive education statistically disappears, and the genetic contribution becomes the dominant factor again, that zero point 0.8 figure. The kids kind of revert to their factory settings.
That is just wild to think about. So it implies that all that money and stress might boost a kid in the short term, get them into the fancy college, maybe,
Sure.
but it doesn't fundamentally change their actual processing power.
In a raw biological sense, no. But Safronov adds a really important layer of nuance here, because otherwise, we just give up on schools entirely. He talks about the Flynn effect.
I've heard of this. This is the idea that humanity is getting smarter every generation, right?
Well, specifically that IQ scores are going up. The average IQ grows by about 5 points every 10 years.
Okay.
Now, if you look at that biologically, it makes no sense. We haven't evolved as a species in 50 years. Evolution doesn't work that fast. Our brains are the same size as our grandparents' brains
Why are the scores going up?
because we're getting better at taking tests.
Ah.
We live in an information-dense world. We are basically training for the test from the moment we're born. Severnov's point is we aren't seeing a biological upgrade in raw intelligence. We are seeing a learned skill.
We're maximizing the hardware we have, but we aren't changing the hardware.
Yeah, it's a great way to put it. We're optimizing the software, but the chip is the same.
Okay, so if general intelligence is largely genetic in the long run, what about specific talents?
Right.
You see parents who are just convinced their 5-year-old is the next Serena Williams or the next Hemingway. Can we test for that? Can we spot the writer gene?
The talent gene myth. It's a huge industry now, people selling these talent assessments for kids. But Severnov is pretty blunt about this. The answer is no, you cannot.
You can't just swab a cheek and see professional tennis player on the readout.
It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
Traits like writing ability or sports talent or even temperament are what we call polygenic.
Meaning many genes.
Many genes.
Yeah.
They aren't controlled by a single switch. It's not like having blue eyes or brown eyes, which is relatively simple.
So how should we visualize it then?
He uses this analogy of a sound equalizer in a music studio. You know those big mixing boards producers use?
Oh, yeah, with all the little sliders?
Thousands of them. So imagine that instead of one light switch that says talent, ONOF, you have a mixing board with 20,000 of those sliders.
And those are your genes.
Those are your genes. And to get a specific result, like being a world-class tennis player, you need thousands of those sliders adjusted just slightly in a very specific combination.
And that combination includes things we don't even think of as talent.
Exactly right. It's not just hits ball good. It's skeletal structure, it's eyesight, reaction time, how your muscles process sugar, how fast your heart recovers, your spatial awareness.
Even how sweaty your palms get when you're nervous.
Exactly. You can't predict the final song just by looking at one or two sliders. It's the aggregate of thousands of tiny adjustments. And because it's so complex, you can't really test for it.
You just have to let the kid play tennis and see what happens.
You just have to see what happens.
Which brings us to the sheer scale of this code we're carrying around. Because I don't think I truly grasped how much information is inside us until I read the comparison he made to literature.
It is staggering. We talk about genes casually, but the human genome consists of 6 billion letters.
6 billion.
That's 3 billion from your mom and 3 billion from your dad.
And he compared it to War and Peace, which is famous for being a doorstop of a book.
War and Peace is massive, but it only has a few million letters. Your genome is thousands of times longer than War and Peace. If you printed it out, it would fill an entire library.
And here's the part that I found so humbling. If you take that massive library of my DNA and you compare it to yours or to anyone listening, oh, it's 99.9% identical. Wow. The text is almost exactly the same. The differences, the things that make you you and me, the height, the hair color, the risk of diabetes, those are just typos.
Typos, I love that framing.
It's about one difference every 1,000 letters. Across the whole genome, that's about 6 million typos or variations.
So we are all just mutants, basically.
We are all mutants. We're all just walking collections of copy errors. And this leads to the mechanism of inheritance, which is where the lottery in our title comes from.
Right.
We know the basic rule. You get 50% of your genes from mom and 50% from dad. That is guaranteed.
But the source brought up something that blew my mind. The grandparent surprise.
Yes.
I always just assumed, basic math, that I was 25% of each grandparent. It seems logical. If I'm half mom and mom is half her dad, then I'm a quarter grandpa.
It seems logical, but biology is messier than simple division.
Because of how sex cells are formed, a process called meiosis, the genes get shuffled before they're passed on. It's like shuffling a deck of cards. It's not a neat 50-50 split of the grandparents' contribution.
Wait, so the deck gets cut randomly?
Completely randomly. So theoretically, you could have received a massive chunk of genetic material from your maternal grandfather and almost nothing from your maternal grandmother.
You could get 90% from grandpa and 10% from grandma.
Theoretically, yes. The shuffle is random. You carry 50% from your mom, but which 50% of her parents she passed to you is a total roll of dice.
This totally debunks those genealogy claims, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
The people at parties who are like, I'm descended from Genghis Khan, or I'm related to Napoleon.
Severnoff calls this the Genghis Khan fallacy. You might be genealogically descended from him. He might be a name on your family tree.
On a piece of paper.
Right. But because of this dilution and uneven shuffling over generations, you might carry 0% of his actual genetic material.
The signal just fades out.
The name survives, but the code is lost. You might have the family crest, but biologically you're a stranger.
Now, this concept of shuffling or remixing, it explains something else that's a bit dark but biologically important. Why inbreeding is so dangerous. We know it's a social taboo, but Severnoff breaks it down as a purely mechanical problem.
It's a typo problem. Remember, we have 2 copies of every gene, one from mom, one from dad. Usually, if mom gives you a broken gene, a bad typo that causes a disease, dad gives you a working version that covers it up.
It's a backup system.
Exactly. The working gene compensates for the broken one. But if you marry your cousin,
You share the same grandparents.
which means there is a much higher chance that you both carry the same bad typo inherited from a common ancestor.
Oh.
And if you both pass that broken copy to your child, the child has no backup. The system fails.
Yeah.
Mating outside the family introduces new text that masks the errors.
So diversity isn't just a buzzword. It's a biological safety requirement. We need strangers' DNA to patch our own holes.
That's a good way to put it.
Okay, so we've got these typos. Some make us unique, some are harmless, but some are dangerous. This brings us to the booming world of commercial genetic testing, 23andMe, Ancestry, and all that.
A multi-billion-dollar industry.
Yeah, everyone is doing it. But Severnoff seems pretty skeptical about how useful these tests are for the average person. He basically calls them entertainment.
He does.
That seems harsh, given how seriously people take their results.
Well, his reasoning helps clarify why we are so bad at understanding risk. It's all about statistical risk versus absolute risk.
The 10x risk example really clarified it for me. Can you break that down?
Sure. Imagine you take a test and it tells you, warning, you have a genetic marker that increases your risk of some rare disease by 10 times.
I'd panic. 10 times sounds catastrophic. I'd be writing my will.
Of course. But you have to ask, what's the baseline risk? If the baseline risk for that disease is, say, 1 in a million,
Then my risk is now 10 in a million?
which is still 0.0001%. It's statistically negligible. Severnov compares it to the risk of dying in a car crash. We get in cars every day without thinking twice. Yet that statistical risk is significantly higher than many of the scary genetic risks people lose sleep over.
So, knowing you have a tiny elevation and a tiny risk doesn't actually help you make better life decisions. It just creates anxiety.
Precisely. It's selling you worry. Unless you can do something about it, the information is just noise.
But surely there are times when testing actually matters. He didn't dismiss it entirely.
No, absolutely not. He highlights two specific areas where testing is scientifically valid and crucial. The first is pharmacogenetics.
Which is testing how your body processes drugs,
That's
right?
exactly. Your enzymes, which are built by your genes, determine how fast you metabolize medicine. For things like cancer treatment or antidepressants, knowing your genetic makeup can tell a doctor, this drug won't work or this dose will be toxic. That saves lives.
And the second area was family planning.
Specifically carrier screening. This goes right back to the backup system we talked about. Checking if both parents carry the same broken gene for a recessive disease like cystic fibrosis. If both parents are carriers, there is a 25% chance the child gets two bad copies. That is a high probability event, not some vague statistical risk.
He also brought up the Angelina Jolie case. She famously had a preventative mastectomy because she carried the BRCA mutation.
And Severnov validates that decision completely. That wasn't a 10 in a million situation. The BRCA mutation carries an extremely high probability of developing breast cancer. We're talking upwards of 60–70% in some cases.
Wow.
When the risk is that high, drastic preventative action makes statistical sense.
So the takeaway is ignore the vague lifestyle risks, but pay close attention to the specific high-impact mechanical failures.
That's the rule of thumb. Don't worry about the noise, worry about the signal.
Let's shift gears to something that affects all of us no matter our genes. Aging. I found his definition of aging to be, well, almost mechanical. It wasn't poetic at all.
It's definitely not poetic. He defines aging largely as the accumulation of errors. Think about that copy machine analogy again. Every single time a cell divides, it has to copy all 6 billion letters of DNA.
And the machine isn't perfect.
No, it makes roughly 100 errors per division. Now, usually, that's fine. The body fixes them, or they happen in junk DNA where it doesn't matter. But over a lifetime, those errors just accumulate. The manuscript gets harder and harder to read.
And this is why he points out the difference between fathers and mothers regarding what they pass on.
Right, which was surprising.
It was. I usually hear about the biological clock for women, but he says older fathers actually pass on more mutations.
It's because of how the cells are made.
Ah.
A woman is born with all the eggs she will ever have. They aren't dividing constantly, they're in storage. But sperm. Sperm cells divide continuously throughout a man's life. It's a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy.
Like making a photocopy of a photocopy. Eventually it gets blurry.
Exactly. So by the time a man is 50 or 60, his sperm cells have gone through many, many more division cycles than a 20-year-old's, meaning they have accumulated far more typos.
So the manuscript gets messier the longer the scribe has been working. And this accumulation of errors is also how he explains cancer, isn't it?
Yes. He describes cancer not as some distinct invading force, but as a statistical inevitability. If you live long enough, your cells will divide enough times that eventually, just by random chance, an error will hit a critical wire, a gene that controls cell growth, and that's when cancer begins.
That is a sobering thought, that it's just baked into the system. But it's not just internal errors, right? We're also getting battered from the outside.
Right. External factors accelerate the corruption of the text. UV radiation from the sun is a big one. Photons from the sun literally smash into the DNA helix and change the letters. That's what photoaging is.
And then there's food. I love the internal combustion engine analogy.
It's so vivid, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Digestion is basically burning fuel. And just like a car engine, burning fuel creates exhaust.
Okay.
In our bodies, that exhaust is active forms of oxygen-free radicals. And these things just fly around and damage our DNA.
So eating is literally causing wear and tear on our genetic code. Does that mean we should just stop eating?
Well, he does mention that in worms and flies, caloric restriction, basically starving them a bit, drastically extends their life.
Well,
But humans aren't worms. It hasn't been ethically or scientifically proven to work the same way for us yet. And frankly, a life of starvation might feel longer, but is it better?
fair point.
Yeah.
I will keep my dinner. So we're accumulating these typos, dodging UV rays, and trying not to rust from the inside out. Naturally, the conversation turns to, can we fix the code?
Right.
Can we edit the typos? This brings us to the ethics of gene editing, specifically the CRISPR baby scandal.
The case of He Jiankui, this is a pivotal and a very dark moment in modern genetics. He used CRISPR technology to edit twin girls in China to be resistant to HIV.
On the surface, preventing HIV sounds like a noble goal. Why was the scientific community so horrified? Why was this considered such a failure?
Severnov breaks it down beautifully. First, it wasn't curing a disease the babies had. It was an enhancement for a potential future risk, a risk that can be avoided by other means.
So it was unnecessary. But what about the risk of the edit itself?
That's the plain analogy. Imagine the genome is a complex blueprint for a Boeing 747. We know what some of the wires do, but we don't know what all of them do. If you go in with wire cutters to snip one wire because you think it's unnecessary,
You might accidentally cut the wire for the landing gear.
exactly, everything is connected. By editing the gene for HIV resistance, he might have accidentally broken a different gene, maybe one that protects against the flu or West Nile virus or affects brain development. We just don't know the long-term consequences.
Plus the consent issue. You can't get consent from an embryo.
And you can't really get informed consent from parents who likely don't understand the intricate molecular risks. It was just reckless gambling with human lives.
But there is one biotech intervention he seemed positive about, which felt like a nice contrast. Stem cells, specifically banking umbilical cord blood.
Yes, he views this as valid biological insurance. If a child develops leukemia, the standard treatment often involves destroying their bone marrow and replacing it with a donor's.
But finding a donor is a nightmare.
And even if you find one, there's a risk of rejection. The body fights it. But a child's own cord blood, it's a perfect genetic match. It's their own backup copy from day one. It removes the compatibility problem entirely.
So banking cord blood is sensible insurance. Editing embryos is reckless gambling.
That seems to be the expert consensus. One is preserving the original code, the other is trying to rewrite it without understanding the language.
This has been quite a journey through our own biology. It's a bit overwhelming. We've talked about IQ, typos, cancer, grandfathers, CRISPR. So if we strip it all back, what does this mean for us, the people trying to live these lives?
I think the summary is that we are a mix of strict code and total randomness. Our IQ has a genetic ceiling, but our environment helps us reach it. Our health is a game of statistical probability. And our aging is simply the cost of being alive, the cost of copying the data over and over.
It takes the pressure off a bit, doesn't it? You can't control the typos.
You can't. But understanding them helps. It helps you make better decisions, like wearing sunscreen to stop those photons from scrambling your code, or considering carrier screening before having kids. It shifts the focus from destiny to probability management.
And it helps us accept that our kids are just their own unique shuffle of the deck.
Exactly. They are a remix of a remix. You provide the raw material, but the final mix is out of your hands.
I want to leave everyone with a final thought from the source that I found really provocative. Severnov mentions that true immortality isn't about us living forever, it's about the passing of the code. We are just temporary vessels for a 6 billion-letter book that is constantly rewriting itself.
It really raises the question, are we the point of life? Or is the code the point, and we're just the library that houses it for a generation before passing it on?
Something to think about the next time you look in the mirror and see your grandfather's nose. Thanks for listening to this deep dive into the genetic lottery. We'll see you next time.